All right, so let's take a look at chapter 22 in Bio 158. So chapter 22 deals with the lymphatic system and then also the immune system. So let's look at the functions of the lymphatic system. So if we look at the lymphatic system, we see it's another one of these vessel systems like the circulatory system. Although, we're not having the heart pump stuff through here. So it has a few functions here. One is it transports fluid away from interstitial tissues into the bloodstream. So if we look at this next picture, this is something we talked about in previous chapters, was at capillaries, we have high hydrostatic pressure that's going to force water and small dissolved substances through the capillaries and into the interstitial tissues, the spaces between the cells. Well, to prevent that fluid from accumulating there, we have these lymphatic capillaries there to absorb that excess fluid. And then eventually that's going to go back into venous circulation. Let's look at this picture here. Shows somebody with elephantitis. And elephantitis is caused by a parasitic worm that actually resides in the lymphatic vessels, and it prevents the flow of this interstitial fluid back into venous circulation. So that fluid accumulates in those tissues. So you have very high edema here. And so that's what you see there. So don't walk around barefoot outside in Southeast Asia, and then you can avoid this elephantitis from occurring. Okay, another thing that it does is in our digestive tract, we have these small little lymphatic vessels there called lacteals. We'll talk about those here in a minute, but these are going to absorb digested fats from the small intestine. So fats don't go directly into our blood, they go through our lymphatic system first and then into our blood. And the last function here is that it defends against infections. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about our immune system in this chapter. So let's take a look at structures in the lymphatic system. So looking at lymphatic pathways. And so once again, you can see the entire lymphatic system here, a lot of lymphatic vessels. These are lymph nodes. Those are little swellings there along the way. So as I mentioned here, lymphatic capillaries are going to absorb this interstitial fluid. It's going to prevent the accumulation of that excess fluid in the tissues, which is what is known as edema. They are associated with capillary networks. And what they get out of this is what we just call lymph. So this is fluid transported by lymphatic capillaries. All right, so the next thing is a lacteal. So back to our small intestine here. Lacteals are specialized lymphatic capillaries found in the intestinal villi of the intestinal mucosa. So this is a villus. These are like finger-like projections in our small intestine. We'll talk about those in a couple of chapters. So they're going to absorb these digestive fats. And what they get out of this is what we call chyle, so C-H-Y-L-E. So this is a fatty lymph. So just by the way, lymph just means fluid, all right? So if we look at lymphatic vessels, this is showing a lymphatic vessel here. They are similar to veins in that they have valves in them. And the valves, like veins, are there to prevent backflow from occurring. All right, so if we go above lymphatic vessels, we get these lymphatic trunks. So these are larger lymphatic vessels. That's a duct, that's a larger one, but our largest one are collecting ducts. These are the two largest lymphatic vessels. We have thoracic duct, which is what this one is here. And so this empties into the left subclavian vein. And then we have the right lymphatic duct, which is, so it's over here. So the right lymphatic duct, that empties into the right subclavian vein. So as I said, that lymph drains into the venous circulation. As you can look over here, this picture shows, the thoracic duct actually drains most of our body. So this is not symmetrical at all. All right, let's take a look briefly at lymph and its structure. Lymph is similar to blood plasma, except that it lacks the plasma proteins. So as I mentioned here, let's just go back to this picture. High hydrostatic pressure is going to force water, dissolve substances through those membranes. But plasma proteins, blood cells obviously cannot move through those membranes. And so what gets collected by the lymphatic capillaries is that fluid. So kind of similar to plasma, but it lacks those plasma proteins. The movement, there is low hydrostatic pressure in the lymphatic capillaries. As I mentioned here, they have these valves along the way. That's going to help move the lymph in one direction. And so I've talked about a couple of ways that blood gets moved through the veins, and this is by the muscular pump and the respiratory pump, and those same things are going to work here by squeezing these with the valves. That's going to allow that lymph to move in one direction. Okay, so let's take a look at lymph nodes. So this is a blow-up picture of lymph nodes. A lymph node is a mass of lymphoid tissue located along the course of a lymphatic vessel. They contain a lot of lymphocytes and macrophages with reticular fibers in them. This is a slide of a lymph node there. So what they do is, you can see a lot of lymphatic vessels are coming into this guy. They're going to filter potentially harmful particles from the lymph, bacteria, viruses, pathogens, that kind of stuff. And they're also going to help activate the immune system. All right, so the way I like to look at them, if we go back to, way back here to this first picture here, you can see these lymph nodes are just scattered throughout our body. I like to think of our white blood cells as our soldiers and our lymph nodes as our military forts, and we spread them out throughout the body. And that's why a lot of times if you get it, like maybe you have a cold, you might feel your lymph nodes getting a little larger, and that's because that's where a lot of the fighting is occurring. So if we move on to other lymphoid organs, these other lymphoid organs are also composed of reticular connective tissue. The first here is the spleen. The spleen is our largest lymphatic organ. If we look inside of the spleen, so our stomach is right here, so it's just like kind of on the side of our stomach. So this is cut into the spleen, and we're going to see two different types of tissue here. We have white pulp here and then red pulp. Now this is a slide of this. White pulp is usually stained like this purplish color, and the red pulp is kind of a pinkish color. So white pulp is similar to lymph nodes. It contains a lot of white blood cells there. Red pulp, this is a site of red blood cell filtration. So macrophages here are going to remove old and damaged red blood cells. Some other functions they have is they can store some of the breakdown products of those red blood cells. It is a site of red blood cell formation in the fetus, and it stores blood platelets. Now, you can live without your spleen, but it's helpful to have it because if you lose your spleen, you're more susceptible to digestive infections. All right, moving on to the thymus. So here's the thymus there. It's this bilobe structure that's found above the heart. So here, the thymus makes specific types of lymphocytes called T lymphocytes. All right, so the thymus gland secretes thymosin and thymopoietin, and these cause these undifferentiated T cells to become T lymphocytes. So undifferentiated lymphocytes become T lymphocytes. So these cells become immunocompetent, meaning this is the ability of the cells to function against specific pathogens in the immune response. Okay, so this is one of the properties that lymphocytes have, is that they are immunocompetent. One of the things about the thymus is that it's much larger in children than it is in adults. So this is showing a newborn here, this is showing an adult, there's a thymus there, there's a thymus there by comparison. You can see it's pretty large here. And the reason is that when we're in our mom, we're in a sterile environment, but as soon as we're born, we are constantly exposed to microbes, right? And so any microbe that we encounter, that microbe could be good for us, could be bad for us, but all good microbes can be opportunistic pathogens. So we have to develop an immune response to just about everything that we encounter. And when we're born, everything that we encounter is brand new. So we have to develop an immune response to literally everything out there. As we get older, we are going to encounter less and less new microbes out there. And so, constantly making brand new T lymphocytes to every specific pathogen that we encounter becomes less and less. Okay, so next are our tonsils. Now this is showing this with our soft palate and our uvula removed. All right, so tonsils are non-encapsulated lymph nodes. So typically lymph nodes have a tough fibrous connective tissue covering around them. Our tonsils do not have that. So here we have a few of these. We have the palatine tonsils. That's what typically people refer to as tonsils. We have lingual tonsils. Those are on our tongue. And then the pharyngeal tonsils up here. They're in the upper part of our nasopharynx. A lot of times people refer to these as adenoids. So if we go to our next picture here, so you can see that's where those pharyngeal tonsils are. So one of the things you see in here is they have these, what they call tonsillar crypts there in the surface. And those crypts, what that does is it traps bacteria, which are eventually destroyed by that lymphatic tissue. So they're literally made to kind of invite infection. And what this does is it promotes better health later. So if you get exposed to stuff earlier, you develop immunity to it, you don't have to deal with it later on. All right. But some people get tonsillitis, and that's an acute inflammation of those palatine tonsils. And so if they have this chronic tonsillitis, some of those people have those tonsils removed because of that. So if we move down into our small intestine, which is our major absorptive organ, we can find these structures like this, and this is called a Peyer's patch. And these are isolated clusters of lymphoid follicles. They are similar to tonsils. They're in the walls of our small intestine, and they're going to help prevent the spread of infection. And so, here's the other thing, once again, good bacteria, bad bacteria, depends on where that bacteria is. We have a lot of bacteria in our large intestine, our colon, and it's fine there. But if that bacteria gets into our small intestine, it can create some problems for us. So towards the end of our small intestine, we have a lot more of these Peyer's patches there to help kill off, this bacteria that's just in the wrong place. Lastly is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow produces the white blood cells.